Have you ever dropped a handful of old pennies into a jar without giving them a second thought? What if one of those forgotten coins could change the way you look at every single cent forever? Before you rush to search your pocket change, there is one important truth that surprises almost everyone. Not every 1967 Lincoln penny is valuable, but the right one, with the right combination of rare characteristics, can attract astonishing attention from serious collectors. And by the end of this story, you'll know exactly why thousands of people are checking their old coin collections again. The 1967 Lincoln penny was produced during a fascinating period in American history. To discourage collectors from hoarding newly minted coins, the U.S. Mint temporarily removed mint marks from circulating coins. That means every genuine 1967 Lincoln cent was struck without a mint mark. Ironically, what was once completely ordinary has become the source of endless confusion today. Now, here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Every week, people discover old pennies in coffee cans, dresser drawers, inherited collections, and forgotten piggy banks. Most are worth only a few cents. But every once in a while, an extraordinary example appears. Coins preserved in exceptional condition, displaying brilliant original color, or featuring dramatic minting errors, can command prices that seem almost unbelievable. You've probably heard incredible stories about a 1967 penny supposedly worth as much as $767,000. That's the kind of headline that spreads across the internet in minutes. But here's the question every smart collector asks. Was it an ordinary penny? Or was there something incredibly rare that made it special? That's the difference between disappointment and discovery. Imagine selling a common penny for 1 cent because it looked old, only to learn later that a rare error or remarkable condition made it worth thousands. Not a pleasant conversation at the dinner table, right? So, what should you actually examine? Start with the coin's condition. A bright, sharply detailed coin with little or no wear immediately deserves a closer look. Then, inspect both sides under good lighting. Search for doubled lettering, off-center strikes, die cracks, or other unusual mint errors. Even small differences can completely change how collectors view a coin. Here's another surprise that many beginners miss. Cleaning the coin almost always reduces its collectible value. That shiny finish might impress your neighbors, but experienced buyers usually prefer untouched original surfaces. And just when you think you've seen everything, another twist appears. Many valuable coins spend decades hidden in ordinary collections because nobody took the time to inspect them carefully. Sometimes the greatest treasure isn't the oldest coin. It's the one everyone else overlooked. So before you spend another penny, take a closer look at your change, your family collection, or that dusty jar sitting on the shelf. Your 1967 Lincoln cent may turn out to be completely ordinary. Or it could be the beginning of an unforgettable discovery that reminds you one simple lesson. Extraordinary value often hides inside the most ordinary places, waiting for someone curious enough to look before everyone else does.
Have you ever reached into your pocket, emptied a forgotten jar of pennies onto the kitchen table, and wondered if one tiny copper coin could quietly be worth more than a luxury mansion? It sounds impossible, yet stories like that have fueled the dreams of collectors across America for generations. Today, we're looking at one of the most talked about modern Lincoln cents ever searched by hopeful collectors, the 1990 Lincoln penny without a mint mark. Some people have heard incredible claims that one could be worth as much as $770,000. But what is the truth behind that astonishing number? Could an ordinary-looking penny really hide extraordinary value? And most importantly, what should you be looking for before you spend another single cent? Stay with me because the final discovery might completely change the way you look at every penny you own. The story begins in 1990, a year that most Americans remember for changing technology, shifting markets, and a nation preparing for a new decade. Millions of Lincoln cents rolled off the presses that year. To most people, they were nothing more than everyday change used for a cup of coffee, a newspaper, or a candy bar. They jingled in pockets, disappeared into cash registers, and were tossed into jars that would eventually collect dust in garages and closets across the country. Nobody imagined that decades later, those same coins would become the subject of endless conversations among collectors, treasure hunters, and curious families searching through inherited collections. The 1990 Lincoln cent without a mint mark was struck in Philadelphia. During that period, Philadelphia pennies typically carried no mint mark at all, making the absence of a mint mark completely normal. That simple fact surprises many new collectors. They assume that because there is no letter beneath the date, the coin must automatically be rare. In reality, hundreds of millions were produced. So why are collectors still searching them? That's where the story becomes much more interesting. Every year, tiny mistakes happen during the coin-making process. Most are caught immediately. Others escape into circulation unnoticed. These rare manufacturing errors can transform an ordinary 1-cent coin into something collectors desperately want to own. Imagine 2 pennies sitting side by side. To almost everyone, they look identical. One buys absolutely nothing beyond its face value. The other could command thousands of dollars because of a detail so small that most people would never notice without magnification. That is exactly why experienced collectors never judge a coin in just a few seconds. Now, before you rush to your coin jar, here's something that might save you from making a costly mistake. Not every valuable coin looks old. Not every old coin is valuable. And sometimes, the youngest-looking coin in the collection becomes the biggest surprise. The 1990 Lincoln cent features Abraham Lincoln on the front, designed by Victor David Brenner, while the reverse displays the familiar Lincoln Memorial. By 1990, these coins were made primarily from zinc with a thin copper coating instead of being solid bronze like older cents. This change had already been in place for several years, making the composition itself fairly common. But collectors rarely chase common metal. They chase uncommon stories. And stories often begin with mistakes. One of the most famous examples connected to this era is the dramatic close AM variety. On certain Lincoln cents, the letters A and M in the word America appear unusually close together instead of showing the normal spacing. This subtle difference has fascinated collectors for years because it resulted from dies intended for proof coins being used on regular circulation strikes. Although the famous and highly valuable close AM variety is associated with later years, especially 1992, it reminds collectors that remarkable minting anomalies really do exist. Which leads to an important question. Could another hidden variety still be sitting unnoticed in an old coffee can somewhere in America? History says yes. Collectors have repeatedly discovered valuable coins years after they first entered circulation. Sometimes the discovery happens during a family estate cleanup. Sometimes it's found inside a forgotten piggy bank. Sometimes it appears in rolls purchased directly from the bank. And sometimes the finder almost spends it before realizing what they have. Imagine that moment. You stop at a gas station. You receive a handful of change. 1 penny catches your eye. Would you notice it? Or would it disappear forever into another cash register? That's exactly why experienced collectors slow down. They inspect dates carefully. They examine surfaces. They compare lettering. They study every tiny detail. Because fortunes are often hidden in details that take only seconds to overlook. Now let's talk about the headline everyone wants to understand. Can a 1990 Lincoln penny without a mint mark actually be worth $770,000? The answer requires careful thinking. Extraordinary prices in the coin market almost never come from ordinary coins. They come from extraordinary circumstances. That could include an extremely rare mint error, a unique die variety, an astonishing state of preservation, or an exceptional combination of all three. A typical circulated 1990 Philadelphia penny remains worth only 1 cent. Even brilliant uncirculated examples generally sell for modest amounts. But once you introduce a dramatic error, authenticated rarity, or an unusual characteristic verified by professional grading services, values can rise dramatically depending on collector demand. This is why sensational headlines spread so quickly across the internet. People hear about one remarkable coin selling for an incredible amount and assume every coin with the same date shares that value. Reality is much more selective. Think of it like classic cars. Millions of vehicles rolled off assembly lines. Only a tiny handful became legendary because they possessed something genuinely different. Coins follow the same principle. Scarcity creates demand. Demand creates competition. Competition creates value. And value creates unforgettable auction stories. Speaking of auctions, imagine standing inside a crowded auction room. The bidding begins. $500, $1,000, $5,000, $10,000. Hands continue rising. Collectors refuse to quit. Why? Because two determined buyers both believe they're looking at an opportunity that may never appear again. That emotional competition is often what pushes exceptional coins into astonishing price territory. Here's something else that surprises many beginners. Condition can matter just as much as rarity. A coin that spent 35 years sliding across counters, bouncing inside pockets, and scraping against keys simply cannot compete with one preserved immediately after leaving the mint. Professional graders examine tiny imperfections invisible to the naked eye. Minute scratches, surface luster, strike quality, original color. Every characteristic influences value. That's why some coins separated by only a single grading point can sell for dramatically different prices. Now let me ask you something. How many pennies are hiding in your home right now? 50? 500? 5,000? If you're like many Americans, you probably have jars tucked away that haven't been opened in years. Those jars represent forgotten history. Most coins inside won't change your financial future. But it only takes one unusual discovery to make the search worthwhile. And that's exactly what keeps collectors motivated decade after decade. Here's where many people accidentally lose money. They clean their coins. It sounds harmless. After all, who doesn't like shiny copper? Unfortunately, cleaning usually damages the original surface. Professional collectors prefer untouched originality over artificial brightness almost every time. That old saying applies perfectly. Sometimes less really is more. If you suspect you've found something unusual, resist the temptation to polish it. Instead, handle it carefully by the edges and store it safely until it can be evaluated properly. Now the excitement begins building again. Suppose you discover a 1990 penny that looks different. Maybe the lettering appears unusual. Maybe the strike seems off-center. Maybe you notice doubling. Maybe the coin feels unlike the others. What should you do? First, compare it carefully with normal examples from the same year. Differences become easier to recognize when two coins sit side by side. Second, use proper lighting and magnification. Many valuable varieties reveal themselves only under close examination. Third, consider professional authentication if the coin appears genuinely unusual. Authentication protects both buyers and sellers while giving collectors confidence in what they're purchasing. Without authentication, extraordinary claims remain only claims. With authentication, genuine discoveries become part of numismatic history. And history has repeatedly shown that remarkable finds still happen. Even today, right now, somewhere in America, perhaps someone is opening an old family safe. Perhaps another person is searching inherited coin albums. Perhaps a child is counting pennies collected over several birthdays. None of them knows what they're about to find. That mystery keeps this hobby alive. It's a modern treasure hunt hiding in plain sight. You don't need a metal detector. You don't need to explore abandoned mines. Sometimes all you need is patience, curiosity, and careful observation. Of course, it's important to stay realistic. Extraordinary values are extraordinarily rare. The overwhelming majority of 1990 no-mint mark pennies will never sell for life-changing amounts. But dismissing every coin without looking is just as unwise as assuming every coin is a fortune. The smartest collectors avoid both extremes. They stay informed. They verify facts. They continue learning. Because knowledge consistently outperforms luck. And here's one final thought that many experienced collectors quietly share. The real treasure isn't always the biggest sale. Sometimes it's the thrill of discovery, the excitement of identifying something others overlooked, the satisfaction of preserving a small piece of American history before it disappears forever. Every Lincoln cent tells a story. Some traveled through countless hands. Some crossed the country. Some rested inside military uniforms, family wallets, church offering plates, and children's piggy banks. Each carries silent memories that no price guide can measure. Then, every once in a great while, one also carries remarkable collector value. So before you ignore another handful of pennies, pause for just a moment. Look at the dates. Study the details. Check for unusual features. Compare what you see. Because somewhere between ordinary change and extraordinary discovery lies the possibility that has inspired generations of collectors to keep searching. Will your next 1990 Lincoln penny without a mint mark be an ordinary 1-cent coin? Probably. Could it reveal an unusual characteristic that deserves closer examination? Absolutely. And that tiny possibility is exactly why millions of Americans still search through jars, rolls, drawers, and inherited collections with hope in their eyes. The next great discovery won't announce itself. It won't glow. It won't make a sound. It will simply wait for someone patient enough to notice what everyone else missed. Perhaps that someone is already holding the coin. Perhaps that someone is you. Have you ever reached into a jar of loose change, pulled out an ordinary-looking penny, and tossed it aside without a second thought? Imagine discovering years later that one of those pennies could have been worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. It sounds unbelievable, but stories like that have happened before, and they continue to fuel one of America's greatest modern treasure hunts. Today, we're looking at the mysterious 1991 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin surrounded by collector excitement, surprising varieties, and extraordinary claims that have inspired millions of people to search through their pocket change. Before you dismiss the pennies sitting in your home, stay with me, because one tiny detail could change everything. The funny thing about valuable coins is that they rarely look valuable. They don't sparkle like gold bars. They don't come in velvet boxes. Most of them look tired, scratched, and forgotten, hidden inside old coffee cans, dresser drawers, piggy banks, or the bottom of a glove compartment. That's exactly why so many remarkable discoveries begin in the most ordinary places. Back in 1991, millions upon millions of Lincoln pennies rolled off the presses. They were made to buy groceries, pay parking meters, and disappear into everyday commerce. Nobody expected people to carefully preserve them. They were simply money. Yet time has a strange way of turning ordinary objects into collectibles, especially when unusual production errors or exceptionally preserved examples enter the picture. Now here's where the story becomes fascinating. If you have a 1991 Lincoln penny without a mint mark, you actually have a coin produced at the Philadelphia Mint. During that year, Philadelphia pennies normally carried no mint mark, so finding one without a letter beneath the date is completely normal. That alone does not make the coin rare. But don't leave just yet, because this is where countless collectors make a mistake. The real value isn't simply about the missing mint mark. It's about what else may be hiding on the coin. Think of it this way. Owning a lottery ticket doesn't guarantee a jackpot. But without the ticket, you certainly can't win. The same idea applies here. Among millions of ordinary 1991 pennies, a tiny number stand apart because of remarkable characteristics. Some display dramatic minting errors. Others survived in astonishing condition, looking almost untouched after decades. These are the coins that can capture the attention of serious collectors. And yes, exceptional Lincoln pennies have sold for astonishing prices over the years. Headlines about six-figure coin sales aren't myths. The rarest examples, especially those with unique characteristics and impeccable preservation, have reached incredible auction results. That's why collectors inspect every detail with almost microscopic precision. So what exactly should you be looking for? First, pay attention to the overall condition. A coin that still has brilliant original luster, sharp lettering, and almost no signs of circulation immediately attracts more interest than one that's heavily worn. Condition isn't just important. It's often the difference between a coin worth a few cents and one worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Here's something that surprises many beginners. A penny doesn't have to be ancient to become valuable. Collectors often chase modern coins because far fewer people bothered to save pristine examples. Most entered circulation immediately, collecting scratches and wear along the way. Finding a nearly perfect survivor decades later is much harder than most people realize. Now imagine opening an old coin album inherited from a family member. Inside sits a bright 1991 penny that looks almost brand new. Suddenly, what seemed like a simple keepsake becomes something worth investigating. But condition is only part of the puzzle. Errors are where excitement truly begins. Every coin begins life as a blank metal planchet before passing through enormous presses that stamp the design into its surface. These machines work with incredible speed and force. Most of the time, everything happens perfectly. Occasionally, something unexpected occurs. Perhaps the die shifts slightly. Perhaps a strike isn't perfectly centered. Perhaps doubling appears in parts of the lettering. Perhaps tiny cracks develop inside the die itself. Each unusual event creates the possibility of something collectors eagerly pursue. Imagine thousands of perfectly identical pennies moving along a conveyor belt. Then suddenly one emerges just a little different from the rest. That single coin becomes the exception everyone wants to find. Would you notice it? Or would it disappear into circulation forever? That's the question that keeps collectors searching year after year. Here's another interesting thought. Many people assume valuable coins always look strange. In reality, some of the most desirable varieties require careful inspection. Without good lighting and magnification, you might completely overlook the feature that makes a coin special. That's why experienced collectors rarely rush. They slow down. They examine every date, every letter, every number, every edge, because fortunes have been missed by people moving too quickly. Now let's talk about one of the biggest misconceptions circulating online. You may have seen dramatic claims that every 1991 no-mint mark penny is automatically worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's simply not how coin collecting works. Extraordinary prices are associated only with exceptionally rare examples that possess highly desirable characteristics, are authenticated by respected grading services, and attract competitive bidding among collectors. In other words, rarity creates value. Condition multiplies it. Collector demand completes the equation. Take away any one of those three ingredients, and the value changes dramatically. That doesn't make your search any less exciting. Actually, it makes it more meaningful, because now you're searching intelligently instead of relying on wishful thinking. Imagine discovering an unusual-looking 1991 penny while sorting through a jar inherited from your grandparents. Instead of immediately spending it, you carefully compare it with known varieties. You inspect the surfaces under magnification. You notice something different. Your heart beats a little faster. Could this be one of those overlooked treasures? Moments like these explain why millions of Americans have fallen in love with coin collecting. Every penny carries possibility. Every roll from the bank offers hope. Every estate sale becomes an adventure. And every forgotten collection might contain a surprise. Here's a quick question. When was the last time you actually looked at the pennies in your wallet? Most people couldn't answer that. That's exactly why hidden treasures continue to survive. People simply aren't paying attention. Of course, not every discovery leads to a fortune. Sometimes the reward is historical. Sometimes it's educational. Sometimes it's the thrill of solving a mystery. But every once in a while, the story ends very differently. Professional coin graders spend years learning how to identify subtle differences invisible to casual observers. They evaluate strike quality, original surfaces, preservation, color, and authenticity with extraordinary precision. Their opinion can dramatically influence collector confidence and market value. This is why authentication matters so much. If a coin truly possesses rare characteristics, independent verification gives buyers confidence they're purchasing exactly what they believe they're buying. Without that confidence, extraordinary prices become much harder to achieve. Now let's pause for just a second. Isn't it amazing that something originally worth 1 cent can inspire so much excitement decades later? If pennies could talk, imagine the stories they'd tell. One may have bought a newspaper. Another paid for candy. Another sat forgotten inside a kitchen drawer for 30 years before becoming the center of attention. Not bad for the smallest coin in your pocket. As fascinating as this sounds, the story isn't over yet. Because there's another lesson hidden inside the 1991 Lincoln penny. Opportunity often disguises itself as something ordinary. The people who make remarkable discoveries usually aren't lucky because they possess magical instincts. They're lucky because they looked. They stayed curious. They refused to assume that everything ordinary must remain ordinary forever. That mindset extends far beyond coin collecting. It applies to history, to investing, to learning, even to everyday life. Sometimes the greatest opportunities hide in places everyone else ignores. Now picture yourself this weekend. You pull an old jar from a closet shelf. Dust covers the lid. Inside are hundreds of forgotten pennies collected over decades. Most people would carry the jar straight to the bank. But now, you hesitate. You spread the coins across a table. One by one, you inspect them. Dates, mint marks, condition, tiny details. What began as loose change suddenly feels like a treasure hunt. Even if you don't discover a six-figure rarity, you've gained something equally valuable. Knowledge. And knowledge allows you to recognize opportunities others miss. The excitement surrounding the 1991 Lincoln penny reminds us that America's coinage isn't just money. It's history you can hold in your hand. Each coin reflects a specific moment in time. Economic conditions, manufacturing technology, national traditions. Even tiny imperfections become permanent records of what happened inside the mint on a particular day decades ago. Collectors aren't merely buying metal. They're preserving stories. And every rare coin tells one that can never be repeated. So before you spend another penny without looking, ask yourself one simple question. What if? What if the coin sitting unnoticed inside your change jar has characteristics collectors have spent years searching for? What if an inherited collection contains something extraordinary? What if the next incredible discovery isn't hidden inside a museum, but inside your own home? That's why experienced collectors never laugh at pocket change. They understand that remarkable finds don't announce themselves. They wait patiently for someone curious enough to notice. The next time a penny lands in your hand, don't see only 1 cent. See possibility. See history. See craftsmanship. See the chance, however small, that an ordinary day could become unforgettable. Because every legendary coin discovery began with someone willing to stop, look closely, and ask whether this tiny piece of copper-colored history might be different from all the rest. And somewhere tonight, as millions of Americans empty their pockets onto kitchen tables, another forgotten Lincoln penny is waiting for someone to recognize its story before it's gone forever. Have you ever reached into your pocket, opened an old coin jar, or emptied a forgotten drawer without giving those pennies a second thought? What if one of those ordinary-looking coins was quietly hiding a value that could completely change your financial future? It sounds impossible, yet history has repeatedly surprised collectors with coins that appeared completely normal until someone looked a little closer. Today we're following the remarkable story surrounding the 1993 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin that many Americans have handled without realizing its potential. By the end of this story, you'll know exactly what makes some of these pennies worth far more than a single cent, why collectors search for them with incredible determination, and the tiny details that could separate an ordinary coin from one that commands astonishing prices. Most people think valuable coins belong in museums or private collections owned by wealthy investors. They imagine gold coins locked inside glass cases or silver dollars resting in velvet-lined boxes. But the fascinating truth is that some of America's most desirable treasures began as everyday pocket change. Millions of Lincoln cents passed through grocery stores, gas stations, coffee shops, and family businesses. They were tossed into jars, forgotten in drawers, and dropped beneath car seats. That's exactly what makes this story so exciting. The greatest treasures are often the ones people overlook. Now imagine finding a penny that looks almost identical to every other penny you've ever seen. The date reads 1993. Above the date, there isn't a visible mint mark. Nothing appears unusual at first glance. In fact, most people would probably spend it without hesitation. That decision could become the biggest financial mistake of their lives. Before we reveal why, let's travel back to 1993. America was changing. The economy was recovering, technology was beginning to reshape everyday life, and billions of Lincoln cents rolled off government presses. Philadelphia produced enormous quantities of pennies that year. Unlike coins struck in Denver, these Philadelphia coins carried no mint mark. That means finding a 1993 penny without a mint mark isn't rare by itself. So why would anyone talk about values reaching hundreds of thousands of dollars? Here's where the story becomes fascinating. Collectors rarely pay extraordinary prices simply because a coin is old. Age alone means very little. They pay for rarity, condition, demand, and sometimes extraordinary minting mistakes that occurred for only a handful of coins before being corrected. Think about it this way. Two identical-looking houses on the same street can have dramatically different values if one contains something unique. Coins work much the same way. The ordinary 1993 no-mint mark penny may only be worth face value if it's worn from circulation. But the rare examples that collectors dream about tell a completely different story. Some survived in astonishing condition, preserving nearly every detail exactly as they left the mint decades ago. Others display remarkable striking characteristics or significant mint errors that transformed ordinary cents into legendary collectibles. And then there are the coins that seem almost too perfect to exist. Professional grading services carefully examine every surface under powerful magnification. They evaluate luster, strike quality, preservation, contact marks, and countless microscopic details invisible to the naked eye. A single tiny scratch can reduce value dramatically. One small fingerprint can cost thousands of dollars. It's almost funny when you think about it. Somewhere, someone probably tossed a potentially valuable penny into a coffee can alongside rusty screws and old batteries. Now imagine the collector who later discovers that same coin. That's enough to make anyone start checking loose change a little more carefully. One of the biggest reasons exceptional Lincoln cents command incredible prices is population rarity. Millions were produced, but very few remain in flawless condition after decades of circulation. Most pennies experienced everyday life. They bought candy, newspapers, gasoline, lunches, and countless cups of coffee. Every transaction left tiny marks. Every pocket introduced friction. Every cash register added another scratch. Perfect survival is incredibly uncommon. That's why collectors compete fiercely whenever one appears. The reported figure of $773,000 captures attention because it represents the extraordinary upper end associated with exceptionally rare and desirable Lincoln cent examples under very specific circumstances. Numbers like these don't apply to average circulated coins, but they remind us how dramatically rarity, condition, provenance, and collector demand can combine during major auctions. Here's the question that keeps collectors awake at night. What if another undiscovered example is still sitting unnoticed somewhere? Maybe inside an inherited collection. Maybe inside a forgotten piggy bank. Maybe inside a dusty coffee tin tucked away in someone's garage. History has shown again and again that remarkable discoveries happen when ordinary people decide to look instead of assume. Now here's something many beginners never realize. The difference between spending 1 cent and preserving a valuable collectible often begins with knowledge. The first thing to examine is the date. Make sure it clearly reads 1993. Next, check above the date for the mint mark. Philadelphia issues normally have no mint mark, while Denver coins carry a D. Then comes the part most people skip. Study the surfaces carefully. Does the coin still shine with original mint luster? Are Lincoln's facial features sharp? Can you clearly see the fine details in his hair and coat? Flip the coin over. Inspect the Lincoln Memorial. Are the architectural lines crisp? Can you see strong detail throughout the design? Even tiny differences matter. Now let's add another layer to the mystery. Mint errors. Collectors absolutely love genuine mint errors because they represent unexpected moments during production. Double strikes, off-center strikes, broad strikes, dramatic die cracks, double dies, clipped planchets, and other authentic manufacturing mistakes often transform ordinary coins into conversation pieces. But here's the catch. Not every strange-looking coin is valuable. Damage after leaving the mint is completely different from an actual mint error. A penny flattened by a train isn't rare. A coin scratched with a screwdriver isn't collectible. A damaged coin is simply damaged. Learning the difference can save enormous disappointment. This is exactly why experienced collectors recommend professional authentication before making assumptions about extraordinary value. Imagine finding what appears to be an amazing coin. You spend weeks imagining auction headlines. You mentally redesign your kitchen. Maybe you even start planning that dream vacation, only to discover later it was damaged after circulation. That's why patience matters. At the same time, imagine ignoring an unusual-looking penny because you assumed it couldn't possibly be worth anything. That possibility has inspired generations of collectors to keep searching. Coin collecting isn't only about money. It's about discovery. It's about preserving history. It's about connecting with millions of Americans who unknowingly carried these tiny pieces of history through decades of everyday life. Every Lincoln cent tells a story. Some purchased school lunches. Some traveled across every state. Some crossed oceans in soldiers' pockets. Others remained untouched inside original mint sets, waiting patiently for decades before anyone appreciated their remarkable preservation. And somewhere within those stories are the exceptional survivors collectors pursue with incredible determination. Let's pause for a moment. Be honest. How many pennies have you ignored this year? 10? 100? Maybe even 1,000? Most people spend more time choosing a cup of coffee than examining the coins passing through their hands every week. It's a humorous thought, but perhaps Abraham Lincoln has been trying to get our attention all along. Here's another important point many people overlook. Cleaning coins almost always reduces their collector value. It seems logical to polish a dirty penny until it shines. Unfortunately, collectors usually prefer original surfaces. Cleaning creates tiny scratches and removes the natural appearance experts expect to see. So if you ever believe you've found an unusual 1993 no-mint mark penny, resist the urge to clean it. Handle it carefully by the edges. Store it safely. Then seek professional evaluation. That single decision could protect significant value. Now the story reaches its most exciting moment. Imagine attending a major coin auction. The room grows quiet. Collectors raise numbered paddles. Telephone bidders wait on the line. Online participants compete from around the world. The bidding climbs. 10,000. 20,000, 50,000, 100,000. The auctioneer barely pauses. The competition becomes intense because every serious buyer understands opportunities like this appear only occasionally. The final hammer falls. Applause fills the room. Another remarkable piece of American numismatic history has found a new home. Moments like these inspire collectors everywhere because they prove extraordinary demand still exists for exceptional coins. Of course, not every 1993 no-mint mark penny will achieve life-changing prices. Most won't. But that's not really the point. The point is that remarkable coins continue to emerge because someone took the time to look carefully. Knowledge creates opportunity. Curiosity creates discovery. Attention creates possibility. Those three habits separate successful collectors from everyone else. The next time you receive change at the grocery store, don't rush. Take a second look. Open that old jar sitting in the closet. Ask relatives whether they have forgotten collections stored away. You may not discover a six-figure rarity tomorrow, but every famous coin discovery began with one simple decision. Someone looked, and someone else didn't. That's a lesson that extends far beyond coin collecting. Opportunities often hide inside ordinary moments. The 1993 no-mint mark Lincoln penny reminds us that appearances can be deceiving. What seems completely ordinary today may become tomorrow's extraordinary discovery when viewed through informed eyes. perhaps the greatest value isn't only measured in dollars. It's measured in awareness. Because once you understand what to look for, you'll never see loose change the same way again. The next penny you hold could simply buy a piece of candy. Or it could become the beginning of an unforgettable story that changes the way you think about history, collecting, and hidden wealth forever. And somewhere tonight, as millions of pennies rest quietly inside drawers, jars, wallets, cash registers, and forgotten collections across America, one remarkable coin may still be waiting for the person willing to notice what everyone else overlooked. That person could be a lifelong collector, could be someone cleaning out an attic, or just maybe the very next time you hear the familiar sound of a penny dropping into your hand, that person could be you. Have you checked the change sitting in your pocket today? Because one ordinary-looking Lincoln penny from the year 2000, the kind millions of Americans have handled without a second thought, has sparked incredible excitement among collectors. Some reports and online claims even mention values reaching as high as $773,000. Imagine discovering that a single cent you've ignored for years could completely change your financial future. It sounds impossible, yet stories like these are exactly why thousands of people are searching through jars, piggy banks, dresser drawers, and forgotten collections every single day. But before you rush to empty every coin jar in your house, there's something incredibly important you need to understand. The truth behind this coin is even more fascinating than the headlines. For most people, a penny is just a penny. It buys almost nothing, gets tossed into cup holders, and often ends up forgotten at the bottom of a drawer. Yet collectors see something entirely different. They see history, rarity, tiny manufacturing mistakes, and hidden treasures that most people overlook every day. The Lincoln cent has been part of American life for more than a century. It has survived world wars, economic crises, technological revolutions, and dramatic changes in American society. Every generation has carried Lincoln pennies in their pockets. Every generation has unknowingly spent coins that later became worth far more than their face value. The year 2000 marked the beginning of a brand new millennium. Americans were celebrating a historic moment. Technology was rapidly changing. The internet was becoming part of everyday life. Meanwhile, the United States Mint was producing billions of Lincoln cents to keep up with circulation. Most were perfectly ordinary, but somewhere among those billions, a handful of extraordinary coins began their journey. Here's where things become interesting. When collectors talk about valuable 2000 Lincoln pennies without a mint mark, they're usually referring to coins struck at the Philadelphia Mint. During that period, Philadelphia cents typically carried no mint mark at all. That means finding a 2000 penny without a mint mark is completely normal. By itself, it does not make the coin rare. Wait, does that mean the stories are fake? Not exactly. This is where many people make a costly mistake. They hear that a certain penny sold for an incredible amount of money and immediately assume every similar-looking coin has the same value. That's simply not how coin collecting works. Extraordinary prices are almost always connected to something extraordinary about the individual coin. It may have an exceptionally rare mint error. It may have survived in nearly perfect condition. It may have a combination of characteristics that experts almost never encounter. Think about it this way. Two identical-looking houses can sit side by side. One may be worth $300,000. The other, because of what's hidden beneath the ground or written in its legal history, could be worth millions. Coins work in much the same way. Condition changes everything. Professional grading services examine coins under powerful magnification, studying every tiny detail. A single scratch invisible to the naked eye can reduce value dramatically. On the other hand, a flawless coin preserved from the day it left the mint can become one of the finest known examples. Now imagine a coin that combines exceptional preservation with a significant minting error. That's when collectors start paying serious attention. Manufacturing errors occur during the minting process. Sometimes the blank planchet isn't positioned correctly. Sometimes the dies become damaged. Occasionally the design is struck more than once. In rare situations, mechanical failures create coins unlike anything intended for circulation. These mistakes were never supposed to leave the mint. Yet every once in a while they do. And that's exactly what fuels the excitement behind searching modern Lincoln cents. But don't start polishing your pennies. Seriously, if Abraham Lincoln suddenly looks shiny enough to use as a mirror, you may have just erased a significant portion of your coin's potential value. Collectors want originality. Cleaning removes the natural surfaces that prove authenticity and preservation. Ironically, trying to make an old penny look newer often makes it worth much less. It's one of the most expensive mistakes beginners make. Now let's imagine a different scenario. You open an old coffee can inherited from a relative. Inside are hundreds of pennies collected over decades. Most people would see spare change. A collector sees possibilities. You begin separating dates. Then another. And another. Soon you have dozens of 2,000 pennies with no mint mark. Does your heart race? Probably should. Not because everyone is worth a fortune, but because one unusual detail could completely change the story. This is why experienced collectors examine every coin carefully. They look for doubling in the lettering. They inspect the date. They study Lincoln's portrait. They search for unusual die cracks, off-center strikes, broad strikes, clipped planchets, and countless other mint errors that casual observers would never notice. Sometimes the difference between a common penny and an extraordinary discovery is smaller than the width of a human hair. That's why patience beats luck. Here's something many people never realize. Some of the most valuable coins were discovered years after they entered circulation. They spent time in cash registers, vending machines, parking meters, and wallets before someone noticed something unusual. Imagine how many remarkable coins may still be circulating today. It's enough to make you think twice before spending your next handful of change. Of course, headlines mentioning values like $773,000 create enormous excitement. They also deserve careful interpretation. Auction prices depend on many factors: authenticity, professional certification, rarity, historical significance, collector demand, competitive bidding, and perhaps most importantly, whether the coin possesses characteristics that make it unique among known examples. One spectacular sale does not automatically establish the value of every similar coin. Yet stories of remarkable auction results continue inspiring collectors because they remind us that hidden treasures really do exist. History has repeatedly proven it. Rare pennies have sold for hundreds of thousands. Some have crossed the $1 million mark. Others sat unnoticed in collections for decades before experts realized exactly what they had. That's why knowledgeable collectors never dismiss a coin based solely on its face value. Now here's a question. When was the last time you actually looked at the pennies in your house? Not counted them. Looked at them. Most people have jars filled with decades of accumulated change. Every family seems to have one tucked away somewhere. Maybe yours is sitting on a shelf. Maybe it's inside the garage. Maybe it's hidden in the attic. Or maybe it's waiting inside a kitchen drawer you've opened 1,000 times without thinking twice. Sometimes remarkable discoveries begin in the most ordinary places. And sometimes they begin with curiosity. Speaking of curiosity, have you ever wondered why collectors become so passionate about tiny pieces of copper-plated zinc? It's because every coin tells a story. It records a specific moment in American history, passed through countless hands. It witnessed purchases, celebrations, vacations, hardships, birthdays, and everyday moments that no history book could ever capture. Your penny may have traveled across every state in America. It may have ridden inside military uniforms. It may have helped buy a child's first baseball card. It may have crossed the country dozens of times before ending up in your possession. That's an incredible journey for something worth only 1 cent. Unless, of course, it's worth much more. Now let's talk about what smart collectors actually do. They never assume. They verify. If they discover an unusual-looking 2000 Lincoln cent, they compare it with reliable reference images. They measure its weight. They inspect it under magnification. If the coin appears genuinely unusual, they consider professional authentication rather than relying on internet rumors. Because in coin collecting, facts are always more valuable than wishful thinking. Here's another surprising reality. Sometimes the biggest treasure isn't the first coin you notice. While searching through pennies for a 2000 issue, collectors often discover valuable coins from completely different years. One search can uncover multiple hidden gems. That's why experienced hobbyists inspect every coin instead of chasing only one date. It's a bit like fishing. You cast your line hoping for one species. Sometimes you catch something even better. And isn't life funny that way? The greatest opportunities often appear when we're paying attention to something else. That lesson applies far beyond coin collecting. Success usually belongs to those willing to examine details others ignore. Collectors understand this better than almost anyone. They train their eyes. They study history. They learn minting processes. They recognize patterns. Eventually, they begin spotting things invisible to beginners. Knowledge becomes their greatest investment. Not expensive equipment. Not luck. Knowledge. Imagine spending just a few evenings learning how to identify genuine mint errors. Imagine recognizing features that millions of Americans overlook every single day. That knowledge stays with you forever. Every handful of change becomes an opportunity. Every inherited collection becomes an adventure. Every flea market, estate sale, and garage sale suddenly looks different. Because now you're seeing possibilities instead of pennies. And perhaps that's the greatest value of all. Not merely the chance of finding an extraordinary coin, but developing the ability to recognize opportunity where everyone else sees ordinary objects. As our story comes to an end, remember this. A 2000 Lincoln penny without a mint mark is usually a common Philadelphia issue. The extraordinary values sometimes associated with this date are linked to exceptionally rare examples with remarkable characteristics, significant mint errors, outstanding preservation, or other unique qualities. Not to every ordinary coin from that year. But that shouldn't discourage you. It should inspire you. Because every legendary discovery started with someone willing to look a little closer than everyone else. So before you spend another penny, pause for just a moment. Turn it over. Study the date. Look for anything unusual. You may find nothing at all. Or you may discover the beginning of a story you'll tell for the rest of your life. After all, history has a remarkable habit of hiding extraordinary treasures inside the most ordinary places. And somewhere tonight, in a forgotten jar, an old wallet, or a dusty box tucked away in an American home, another penny is quietly waiting for someone curious enough to notice that it was never ordinary in the first place. Have you ever reached into your pocket, emptied a jar of spare change onto the kitchen table, or handed a penny to a cashier without giving it a second thought? Imagine discovering that one ordinary-looking coin could change your financial future forever. Now imagine finding out you already spent it years ago because nobody told you what to look for. That's exactly why collectors inspect every single Lincoln cent they come across, especially one that surprises almost everyone. The 2001 Lincoln penny. One extraordinary example has been associated with an astonishing value reaching hundreds of thousands of dollars under exceptional circumstances, proving once again that in the world of coin collecting, the smallest coin can hide the biggest story. Most people believe valuable pennies are all from the early 1900s. They think if a coin isn't old enough to remember World War II, it can't possibly be worth much. That's where countless collectors have been proven wrong. Modern Lincoln cents continue to surprise experts because rarity isn't determined by age alone. It's determined by a remarkable combination of condition, scarcity, minting quality, collector demand, and sometimes an incredible mint error that transforms an everyday coin into a legendary discovery. The 2001 Lincoln penny was struck at the Denver Mint during a year when billions of Lincoln cents entered circulation across America. On paper, there was nothing extraordinary about it. Millions of Americans carried these coins in their pockets every day. Children dropped them into piggy banks. Cashiers handed them out as change. Vending machines accepted them without hesitation. Yet somewhere among those billions of pennies were a tiny number of extraordinary survivors that would later capture the attention of serious collectors. Here's where the story becomes fascinating. Coins are born identical. At least that's the goal. Every die is designed to create the same image over and over again. But perfection is nearly impossible inside a busy mint producing billions of coins under incredible pressure. Tiny differences appear. Some coins leave the press with exceptional sharpness. Others develop fascinating errors. Some somehow avoid scratches, wear, fingerprints, and damage for decades. Those differences can mean everything. Imagine two identical twins. One spends years working outdoors under the hot sun while the other lives inside a museum. 20 years later, they no longer look identical. The same thing happens with coins. A typical circulated 2001 penny remains worth only face value. That's the reality. But an exceptionally preserved coin, especially one with remarkable characteristics, becomes an entirely different conversation. And that's where collectors become detectives. Instead of asking, "How old is it?" they ask, "How perfect is it?" The Lincoln Memorial reverse, introduced in 1959, had already become an American icon by 2001. Abraham Lincoln's portrait continued representing honesty, perseverance, and determination. Every detail mattered. The texture of Lincoln's beard, the sharpness of the lettering, the crisp steps of the memorial. Even the smallest design element could separate an average coin from an elite collectible. Professional grading completely changed the market. Years ago, collectors relied mostly on personal opinions. Today, coins are examined under magnification, graded according to internationally recognized standards, sealed inside protective holders, and traded around the world. That single grade can dramatically influence value. Think about classic cars. A rusty, everyday vehicle might sell for a few $1,000s. The exact same model, preserved in showroom condition, might sell for hundreds of thousands. Coins follow the same principle. The difference between an average circulated penny and an elite mint state example isn't measured in years. It's measured in perfection. Now here's something many people never consider. Every time someone tosses pennies into a coffee can, leaves them rattling around in a glove compartment, or drops them into a junk drawer with keys and screws, tiny scratches begin forming. Those tiny marks don't seem important until they cost thousands of dollars or more. That's why surviving coins with flawless surfaces become increasingly rare every single year. Every collector understands one simple truth. Nobody can create another untouched 2001 Lincoln cent. Whatever pristine examples still exist today are all we'll ever have. And every year, a few more disappear into circulation, become damaged, or simply get overlooked forever. That shrinking supply creates excitement. It also creates opportunity. But there's another twist to this story that keeps collectors awake at night. Mint errors. The United States Mint operates with extraordinary precision, yet no manufacturing process is absolutely perfect. Occasionally something unusual slips through quality control. Perhaps the strike pressure wasn't quite right. Perhaps a die developed unusual characteristics. Perhaps the planchet entered the press under unusual circumstances. Whatever the reason, these unexpected mistakes can transform an ordinary coin into something extraordinary. Collectors don't view errors as defects. They view them as fingerprints, unique moments frozen forever in metal. And because many people spend error coins without recognizing them, surviving examples often become even scarcer. Here's a question. When was the last time you actually looked closely at the pennies sitting in your home? Not counted them, actually looked at them. Most people never do. That's exactly why incredible discoveries continue happening. A family cleaning out an old dresser. A grandfather's forgotten coin jar. A roll from the local bank. A penny sitting unnoticed inside a desk drawer for 20 years. History shows remarkable finds appear in the most ordinary places. That possibility keeps collectors searching. It's a treasure hunt anyone can join. No expensive equipment. No secret membership. Just patience, curiosity, and knowledge. Speaking of knowledge, here's something experienced collectors rarely ignore. The little D mint mark beneath the date tells an important story. It identifies the Denver Mint, one of America's major coin-producing facilities. While millions were struck there during 2001, identifying the mint helps collectors categorize varieties and compare populations. Every detail matters. The color matters. The strike matters. The luster matters. The surfaces matter. The eye appeal matters. When elite collectors compete for the finest known examples, even microscopic differences can influence bidding. That's difficult for casual observers to understand. After all, it's still just one penny. Or is it? Think about famous paintings. Canvas and paint don't explain million-dollar prices. Rarity does. History does. Demand does. Coins work the same way. Metal alone doesn't determine value. The story does. The scarcity does. The condition does. The competition among collectors does. Now imagine this scene. An auction room falls silent. Bidding begins. One collector raises a paddle. Another immediately responds. The numbers climb. Nobody wants to lose, because opportunities like this don't appear every day. Suddenly, what began life as a 1-cent coin commands astonishing attention. It's almost unbelievable. Yet stories like these continue inspiring collectors across America. Of course, not every online claim should be accepted without careful verification. Headlines often highlight extraordinary auction results involving exceptionally rare conditions, unique characteristics, or certified examples rather than ordinary circulating coins. That's why education remains your greatest investment. Never clean an old coin. That's one of the biggest mistakes beginners make. It seems logical. A shiny penny should be worth more, right? Actually, cleaning usually destroys original surfaces collectors want preserved. Imagine someone polishing antique furniture with sandpaper. It might become shiny, but much of its historical value disappears forever. Coins deserve the same respect. If you believe you've found something unusual, hold it only by the edges whenever possible. Store it safely. Compare it carefully. Seek professional evaluation before making decisions. One small choice today could preserve significant value tomorrow. Now let's pause for a second. Be honest. How many pennies are sitting somewhere in your house right now? 50? 500? 5,000? Don't worry. Nobody's judging. Even the penny hiding beneath your couch cushion suddenly seems a little more interesting, doesn't it? Sometimes the greatest treasures are literally hiding in plain sight. That's part of what makes coin collecting so addictive. Every handful of change carries possibility. Every bank roll contains suspense. Every estate sale brings hope. Every forgotten piggy bank becomes a mystery waiting to be solved. And unlike many hobbies, this one starts with money itself. There's something deeply satisfying about that. The search also connects us with American history. The Lincoln cent has witnessed changing presidents, economic booms, recessions, technological revolutions, and generations of families. One small coin passes through thousands of hands over its lifetime. Each scratch tells part of that journey. Each pristine survivor somehow escaped it. That's remarkable. As the years continue passing, more collectors are paying attention to modern issues once dismissed as too common. History has shown today's ordinary coins sometimes become tomorrow's celebrated rarities. Nobody knows exactly which examples future generations will prize most. That's why experienced collectors never stop learning. They never stop searching. They never stop checking one more roll, one more pocketful, one more coin jar, because the next discovery always feels possible. Maybe that's the real lesson behind the legendary 2001 Lincoln penny. Opportunity doesn't always arrive wrapped in gold. Sometimes it arrives disguised as the smallest coin in your pocket. The people who recognize opportunity first are often the ones who benefit most. So before you spend another handful of pennies without looking, take one extra minute. Turn each coin over. Study the date. Find the mint mark. Look at the details. Ask questions. Stay curious. Because somewhere across America, someone is probably discovering a remarkable coin today. Tomorrow, that someone could be you. And if that unforgettable moment ever happens, when an ordinary-looking penny reveals extraordinary potential, you'll remember that incredible fortunes don't always begin with dollars. Sometimes they begin with just 1 cent, a careful eye, and the decision to look before letting history slip through your fingers forever. Have you ever reached into your pocket, opened an old jar of pennies, or emptied a forgotten coin box and wondered if one of those ordinary-looking cents could completely change your life? Imagine discovering that a single Lincoln penny, one you almost spent on a cup of coffee, might be connected to a story involving collectors, hidden errors, and values that have climbed into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Today we're exploring the fascinating mystery surrounding the 2006 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin that millions of Americans have handled without a second glance. But before you assume every 2006 penny is worth a fortune, stay with me, because one tiny detail could mean the difference between 1 cent and a life-changing payday. The most expensive coins in America rarely announce themselves. They don't sparkle brighter than other coins. They don't come wrapped in velvet boxes. They quietly hide in everyday change, waiting for someone who knows exactly what to look for. That's exactly why stories like this continue to capture the imagination of collectors across the country. Picture this. A family is cleaning out an old dresser inherited from a grandparent. They find a dusty coffee can packed with pennies collected over decades. At first glance, it looks like nothing more than loose change. Someone jokes that maybe there's enough money for pizza. Everyone laughs. But hidden somewhere inside that pile could be a coin worth dramatically more than its face value. Suddenly the joke doesn't seem so funny anymore. That possibility has inspired millions of Americans to search through old jars, piggy banks, and inherited collections. Most will never find a six-figure coin, but some have discovered coins worth thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars, simply because they recognize something others overlooked. The Lincoln cent has been part of American life since 1909. For generations, it has passed through the hands of children buying candy, parents paying for groceries, and grandparents saving spare change for the future. Few coins have traveled through American history quite like the Lincoln penny. By 2006, the Lincoln Memorial Reverse had become one of the most familiar coin designs ever produced. Billions of these pennies entered circulation. Most were perfectly ordinary, created to facilitate everyday commerce. Yet within those billions of coins, small differences emerged during production. Tiny imperfections, unusual striking characteristics, and rare minting mistakes transformed a handful of common pennies into extraordinary collector treasures. Now here's something many people don't realize. The phrase "no mint mark" often causes confusion. A 2006 penny without a mint mark wasn't necessarily missing something by mistake. Philadelphia-produced Lincoln cents during that period typically carried no mint mark at all. That means the absence of a mint mark alone does not create rarity. So why are collectors paying enormous sums for certain examples? That's where the story becomes far more interesting. Collectors aren't simply buying dates. They're buying rarity, condition, demand, and uniqueness. Think about two identical houses sitting side by side. One has been beautifully preserved for decades while the other has suffered years of neglect. Their values won't be the same. Coins work much the same way. The finest known examples often command astonishing prices because perfection is incredibly difficult to achieve. Imagine a freshly struck penny leaving the mint. Before it ever reaches your pocket, it may already have tiny scratches from colliding with thousands of other coins. Every trip through a cash register adds more wear. Every year in circulation slowly removes microscopic details. Finding a nearly flawless example years later becomes remarkably difficult. Now add something even more unusual. Suppose that nearly perfect coin also displays a rare minting error or an extraordinary striking characteristic verified by professional experts. Suddenly, you're no longer looking at ordinary pocket change. You're looking at an object that collectors may compete fiercely to own. Some reports and online discussions have associated exceptional 2006 Lincoln cents with values reaching astonishing levels, including claims approaching $776,000 for extraordinarily rare examples possessing unique characteristics. These headline numbers typically involve one-of-a-kind situations, elite grading, remarkable mint errors, or highly unusual circumstances that separate them completely from ordinary circulation coins. That's an important distinction because excitement should always be balanced with realistic expectations. But here's the fascinating part. Many people unknowingly spend valuable error coins every single day because they assume every penny is exactly the same. What kinds of features make experienced collectors pause? Look carefully at Lincoln's portrait. Examine the lettering around the edge. Study the date. Inspect the reverse design. Watch for doubling, unusual die varieties, dramatic off-center strikes, die cracks, missing design elements, or other production anomalies. Sometimes the smallest difference creates the biggest opportunity. And here's where things become almost unbelievable. A mistake at the mint isn't always obvious. Some valuable errors require magnification. Others become visible only under proper lighting. That's why seasoned collectors never rush through a coin search. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to overlook something familiar? You probably walk past the same mailbox every day without studying it. The same thing happens with pennies. We see them so often that our brains automatically label them as worthless. But history has repeatedly shown that assumptions can become expensive. Imagine tossing a penny into a tip jar, only to learn years later that it could have funded a new car. That thought alone has motivated countless collectors to slow down and examine every coin more carefully. Now here's a question that might surprise you. What if the most valuable coin in your collection isn't the oldest one? Many people instinctively search for pennies from the early 1900s, assuming age equals value. Yet modern coins can become incredibly valuable when rarity, condition, and demand intersect. That's exactly why coins from the 2000s continue attracting attention from collectors. They're modern enough that many still exist in circulation, but old enough that exceptional examples have become increasingly difficult to locate. Time changes everything. Each year more coins become scratched, damaged, cleaned improperly, or lost forever. High-quality survivors become scarcer. Scarcity drives competition. Competition drives prices. And suddenly an overlooked penny becomes the center of an intense bidding battle. Of course, not every exciting story circulating online reflects reality. The internet loves dramatic headlines. Someone claims every 2006 penny is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Another insists every coin without a mint mark should be locked away forever. The truth lies somewhere in between. Knowledge beats excitement every time. Professional collectors verify authenticity before making major purchases. They evaluate strike quality, surface preservation, color, eye appeal, grading, and known varieties. In other words, they investigate before they celebrate. That's advice every collector should follow. If you believe you've discovered an unusual 2006 Lincoln penny, avoid cleaning it. This may sound strange, but cleaning often destroys collectible value. Many people think they're improving a coin's appearance. Instead, they're removing original surfaces collectors desperately want preserved. It's like sanding an antique table until it loses its historical character. Sometimes leaving something exactly as you found it is the smartest decision. Speaking of surprises, here's one almost nobody expects. The difference between a valuable coin and an ordinary coin can sometimes be measured in fractions of a millimeter. A slight shift during striking, a tiny doubled letter, an unusual die break, a remarkably sharp strike. Small details create enormous differences. That's why experienced collectors often spend hours examining coins that casual observers dismiss within seconds. Now imagine opening another old penny jar tomorrow morning. Would you look at those coins differently? Probably, because once you understand what might be hiding in plain sight, every handful of pennies becomes a potential treasure hunt. That's the magic of coin collecting. It transforms ordinary moments into exciting possibilities. Children become historians. Retirees become treasure hunters. Families gather around kitchen tables comparing dates and mint marks instead of scrolling endlessly through their phones. Every coin tells a story. Some stories involve history. Some involve mystery. A rare few involve incredible financial opportunity. And sometimes all three come together. As collectors continue searching for extraordinary Lincoln cents, competition for elite examples only becomes stronger. When a remarkable coin appears at auction, bidders aren't simply buying metal. They're buying rarity. They're buying history. They're buying the chance to own something almost nobody else will ever possess. That emotional connection fuels extraordinary prices. Think about famous works of art. The canvas isn't worth millions because of the paint. Its value comes from uniqueness, history, and demand. Rare coins operate under similar principles. One extraordinary penny can capture the imagination of an entire collecting community. Could your 2006 no-mint Mark Lincoln penny become the next headline? Maybe. Maybe not. That's exactly why verification matters. If your coin appears unusually well-preserved or displays features that differ from ordinary examples, consider having it examined by experienced professionals before making assumptions. Knowledge protects collectors from costly mistakes. It also prevents valuable discoveries from slipping away unnoticed. Before you spend another penny, take one final look. Check the date. Study the surfaces. Look for unusual characteristics. Ask questions. Compare your coin with trusted references. Because somewhere in America tonight, someone is unknowingly carrying a remarkable coin in their wallet. Someone else is about to cash in a jar of pennies without realizing what might be inside. And another collector is patiently searching through thousands of coins, knowing that remarkable discoveries rarely announce themselves with flashing lights. They hide in ordinary places. They wait for curious eyes. They reward careful attention. The next time someone tells you a penny is only worth 1 cent, smile for a moment. Because while most pennies truly are worth exactly 1 cent, history has repeatedly proven that a select few can rewrite expectations, spark fierce competition among collectors, and inspire treasure hunts across the country. Perhaps the greatest value isn't simply the possibility of finding an extraordinary coin. It's developing the habit of looking closer than everyone else. Opportunities often disguise themselves as ordinary objects. Whether in coin collecting, business, or everyday life, the people who notice small details often discover the biggest rewards. So before that 2006 Lincoln penny disappears into a vending machine, a cash register, or the bottom of another forgotten drawer, give it the attention it deserves. Because the next incredible discovery won't come with a warning. It will look almost exactly like every other penny, until the moment someone realizes it isn't.